My name is Richard Rector. I am a developmental psychologist and I currently teach at Birmingham Southern College. I spent most of the 2000s teaching, but also working at a developmental disability center, which is the Civitan Sparks Clinics, and working on assessment and diagnosing. But as a part of working with children in doing this assessment and diagnostic process, I was also called to, especially when working with the preschools in Jefferson County, specifically the Head Start preschools, to go to the local school systems as an advocate for the children during the IEP process where they transition from the preschool to their local elementary school. And so I was coming at it from more the professional side, and then ironically, life threw us a little curve, and I had a child with a severe developmental disability. And at first we weren't sure what it was. He was 13 months and was globally delayed. And should have said this to begin with, my little guy is Ross Rector. And Ross at 13 months wasn't talking, wasn't walking, wasn't even crawling, actually. His physical delays were quite significant. And so we had him seen by early intervention. He started PT, OT, speech, and at 13 months was getting quite a bit of that. And then over the next year and a half, we saw significant improvement. He was closing the gaps, per se, as in all of those areas. By 2.5, he had a little over 200 words, which is still not where it needed to be. A 2-year-old, a 24-month-old should have at least 200 words. And at 30 months, he was just nearing that point. So he was still behind. And he had phrase speech, and his PT was really kicking in, was doing so well physically, was running around and looking much more like what we would hope. And then at the 3-year mark, he then had a severe regression. It was quite sudden, almost overnight, between when he finished school or his preschool in May to the summer. Over that summer, he stopped talking altogether, lost all of his language skills, lost some of the PT, especially the OT. His fine motor skills regressed, and his social emotional skills regressed. He didn't make eye contact anymore. He did not choose to engage us in any sort of back and forth exchanges. Everything stopped, and almost as if he was in a fog. And then it was clear at that point he was on the autism spectrum. And after watching his progress over the years, we started ABA therapy. He did that for 3.5 years and did not see much improvement. And he is nonverbal still at age 10. But starting around age 5 or 6, we saw more of the social emotional attempts, more of the engagement attempts. He's a little more with us and more aware of his surroundings, but from 3 to 5, things were quite bad. Still on the moderate to severe end of the spectrum, and he always will be. But it's now interesting because I came from the IEP from a professional standpoint. I was on one side of the desk, and now here I have a child where I'm now going through the IEP process as a parent, and it was a very different situation. As I said before, Ross is quite severely impaired, and as for that, meaning that we're not seeing a great deal of improvement in his academic skills. However, it has been very important for us and for Ross in that by having his IEP, we go into the school, and it's the same preschool because our school system has a special needs preschool. And so the school that he's at with his IEP is the one that he's been at since he was 3 years old. This is extremely important because the consistency, everyone there knows Ross. And they know going in, because of his IEP, what his background was, what his needs were. and they treat him with a great deal of respect and, quite honestly, a great deal of love. They are extremely caring for my guy. And it all started with our IEP process, because this was not the school he is zoned for. And I think I'm going to have to get to that here when we get to challenges. But his IEP has been a way to break the ice with his teachers, with the other kids in the school. They've been very inclusive, and they've been able to work with us on things that we think that are important for Ross also. There's a couple of them. I told earlier that his biggest deficit at 13 months was his physical issues and severe physical limitations at first. And over the years, the PT, which was a part of his IEP when he was 3, when we transitioned to the IEP, and that has been the biggest success, because Ross struggled walking up steps, alternating feet going up steps. He struggled on the playground. He loved the playground, but he struggled getting around, going up the slide steps, being able to push himself on the swings, things that he wanted to do, to be a part of, things that we as parents wanted to see him do, because you want to see your kids on the playground with the other children. You want to see him happy and engaged, and his physical limitations were causing that to be a difficulty. And the PT that he received through the schools, and of course private PT also, really helped, and we saw dramatic improvement between 3 and 5. And so much so that now, as one of his IEPs, it's just the PT just checks in every so often. There's no need for physical therapy anymore, and that's been our biggest success, actually. Fortunately, we've had a very cooperative school system, but there were challenges. There are 3 specifically that stand out. The first one was this idea of extended school year services. When he had the regression over the summer of his 3rd year, and when it came around to the summer the following year, we wanted extended school year, because we felt like the consistency of going to school throughout the summer was going to be very beneficial to someone who had just regressed the previous summer, and yet we were told we were not going to qualify for ESY, extended school year, because his regression, he was at a level where he was no longer regressing, and to have an extended school year, the child had to show a regression in skills over that school year. Well, he had not regressed over that school year. He had regressed the previous year. The issue, though, was being that his school year, or his goals, were set so low that he could not get any lower. It was truly basement level goals. And there's no way he could regress below those goals. And I argued, well, actually my wife was the one in this particular one. I couldn't make that one. And she argued that she wasn't going to sign it, and she was going to let me, she played off me as the bad guy, and she was going to let me look at it, and then if things didn't work out, we were going to have to discuss due process, which is our nice little code word in the educational system that says, we don't think you're treating our child fairly, and we may have to take this in a more legal way. And lo and behold, the very next day, they found that he did qualify for extended school year services, and some of that was just simply because we knew the verbiage that needed to be used at that point, and not every parent knows what their rights are and what their verbiage is. And once they realized that we were educated enough on that, there was no issue after that. The second challenge was, where was he going to be placed? And our school system, the school that he's zoned for, did not have a special education class. They mainstreamed all children at that school, full inclusion. And when we went for his IEP, for his transition was he going to transition to this school, they did not offer any other choice other than full inclusion. And we did not believe as a family that he was going to benefit from full inclusion. We felt like he really did need a self-contained classroom, at least for part of the day. And he needed a sensory room so that he could decompress when he got overstimulated. He needed a lot of things that this school did not have, and they didn't offer any other choice. And when I brought that up, they seemed surprised, and I think that's because the push has always been from families that they wanted their child more inclusion, but in our case, we felt that didn't benefit Ross. And by bringing it up, then they offered this other school, which was a little further away, but then we had to argue for transportation, and that was a little bit of an issue, but now that was handled pretty quickly by the school system, and I think they were going to wait and see with Ross, and then going to see if he had a really bad kindergarten, and then they were going to come back to us and suggest the self-contained classroom. But all along, that was what we thought was best for Ross. And then the third challenge that we had was they wanted him to start at age 5, and he was just now starting to come out of what we refer to as the 2-year fog, and be more aware of his surroundings. And we wanted him to start at 6 to give him a little more time to be more with us, more in the moment, and at least that was the trajectory we're seeing at that moment. And we wanted to give him a little longer. And so we had to argue for 1 more year of preschool, and we fought very strongly for that. And they did allow that, and it's made a big difference for Ross. That extra year of maturity, of getting to know the school a little bit better, has made we think, a very positive move for Ross. There's lots of things that I could say of what you should do for an IEP and how to prepare. There's so many things. We could talk about knowing the verbiage. We could talk about knowing the rights and who and what specifically you want for your child, and to fight for those. But at the highest point, the thing that we really need to focus on the most, the thing that all parents should know going in, is that the IEP is supposed to be a team effort. The IEP comprises you as the parent, and you are an integral part of this team, but also the child's primary teacher, the PT if they're going to have physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology, possibly audiology if the child has hearing issues. So many different people should be involved. In my case, we also have not just his special education teacher, but his grade appropriate age level teacher has to sit in. And all of these people are supposed to be working in the child's best interest. It is supposed to be a team. And even though you know going in that you may need to be your child's advocate and argue for things that your child needs, it needs to be in a collegial way. These are people who are working with and for your child, and you need to keep that. This is a team. This is not a competition here. We need to work together, and to do that, the best thing that you can do as a parent going in is to have a list of things that you want for your child, and to send that in writing to your school ahead of time so that they know coming in what your concerns are. Without voicing those concerns ahead of time, they may come in with a very different idea of what's best for your child, and then it becomes more of a I want this, they want this, and it becomes a little too competitive. We don't want that. We want the best interest, everyone to be working for the best interest of the child, and to do that is open communication. So you are a part of this team. You need to make certain you're as prepared as the people who are coming to this meeting. And you do that, things should work out. Not always. I understand. I've given you a couple of scenarios in which I had to fight for my child, but in most cases, it's been very collegial. I've always felt like they had his interests, best interests. May not have aligned with what I thought was best, but I never felt like they weren't looking out for him. And some of that is because the communication's been strong, and some of it is just simply the way we communicate. It should not be a us versus them. It should be an us situation.